Joining me now to react to this verdict is attorney Christy Zunzig. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I want to know what your first reaction was when you heard about this verdict. I mean, mine was complete heartache for the Steinle family.
I mean, that and then shock. Just knowing what happened throughout this case, knowing that the father testified on the witness stand and that the jury had to be a unanimous decision and unanimously decided to acquit him. It was really shocking.
I mean, how in the world? He claims that this was an accident, and you said that he'd actually also changed his story.
Right. So at first he said, you know, he had been aiming at a seal and he was trying to shoot the seal. Then he said he may have stepped on it and it just fired that way. And then there's also witness testimony that says he had been flinging it around his finger and it may have accidentally discharged that way. So there are multiple accounts from him about how this accidentally happened.
So why do you think the verdict went this way? Why not even just manslaughter?
Well, that's something that's really interesting because manslaughter, it could have accidentally discharged if he had been reckless, criminally negligent. There are ways you could say, you know what, it was an accident, but it was an accident that maybe you should have known would be a problem and it could have caused death, and it in fact it did.
Right.
And so it's really interesting that they found that it wasn't a manslaughter conviction and they in fact acquitted him. I think that a part of that may be the fact that the defense brought up that it ricocheted and really made that a big part of their case, and maybe they took that into account more than they should have. And other than that, I have to just assume there were some political reasons that they decided to make this decision.
That's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, is this a political verdict? Is that what happened here?
I have to say, of course it's a political verdict, because you're looking at San Francisco and the facts of the case. It's just, it doesn't make sense logically that this would be something that 12 jurors could come up with and acquit.
Well, it's a sanctuary city, first of all.
Right.
If he had been deported the way he should have been, if he would not been allowed in this country to begin with, as he should not have been, this would not have happened at all.
Agreed. And one of the things in the case, they really didn't dwell on any of those facts. They kind of kept a lot of that out, that he had been deported so many times, that there were other issues. They really didn't bring that up to the jury. And not that they should have brought all of that up, but that should have been more of an issue than it was.
But his attorney sure brought it up as soon as it was over. His first statement.
Right. You know, it was interesting. His first statement says this wasn't a political decision, and then he starts right into politics.
Absolutely. Yeah, and talked about President Trump and how he had brought this up as far back as his campaign. And I think that this will definitely turn the tide in favor of Republicans and in favor of people in terms of the wall.
And I think you're completely right, because people are outraged by this decision, because how could they really acquit this guy who says, I fired the gun, I shot her, she's now dead, and it's because of me, and I shouldn't have been here in the first place.
He shouldn't have been here. He shouldn't have had the gun.
Right.
Which was the only charge that he is now facing.
Right. That's the only charge that stuck. That's the only thing they found him guilty of.
I know that he's being deported, allegedly, as soon as possible. But what other options does the Steinle family have at this point? Anything?
At this point, I don't really see any way that they can appeal successfully. So they really aren't left with any good options.
It's just such a shame. It really is a travesty. Thank you so much for joining us, Christy. Much more on this throughout the day, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thanks.